One evening, Karen invited me over for dinner. She explained that Vivian would be out of town, but her other roommate, Judith, whom I had not met, would be there along with her boyfriend. She thought we might make an engaging foursome. I readily agreed to the invitation. She met me at the door and introduced me to her roommate. I was preparing a jovial greeting, but I never delivered it because when Judith walked in the room, I was struck dumb. She was very obviously the subject for the first post-Vivian study hanging on the wall in the office. That particular painting had caused more discussion than most. The young woman in the picture had very large breasts, but we'd all seen quite a few of them. It was the facial features of the model that was so striking: her eyes, her cheekbones, her mouth. She was not a beauty. She was too irregular for that. She was striking, exotic somehow, and so compelling that a few people even ventured the heretical opinion that the goose might be developing some actual talent after so many mediocre, uninspired attempts. "I think he might have caught the light this time," one person ventured to say. Though the woman in the picture, because she was so distinctive, seemed eminently identifiable, no one in the lab knew her or could recall having seen her around town in the school campus. She became something of a mystery lady, dubbed Betty Co-Ed. And now, here she was in front of me, welcoming me into her home. I blushed and shook her hand, managed a small smile, but said nothing. Karen steered me into the kitchen, purportedly to chop vegetables. I sputtered, It's Betty Co-Ed." She said, "I know that. Please keep it down." I was walking in circles. "Holy cow," I said. "Wait till I tell the gang." "I was afraid of this," she said. "You're not going to tell anyone." "I'm not?" "No. And if you could manage to pull in your tongue, stop drooling, and shut your mouth, I want to tell you something. It's important. Tom is due here any moment, and he doesn't know anything about Judith posing for that painting. They must have talked about it, and he virtually ordered her not to do it, and that was a mistake on his part, because she doesn't like anyone telling her what to do. But she wouldn't have done it if she hadn't needed the money, and Drake offered her twice his fee, the going rate, to do it." I whistled. "So what I'm telling you is, for the love of God, don't mention a word about that painting, not one word, okay?" I get it, I said. "Judith needed the money badly," Karen explained, still whispering, because somewhat ironically, she was an artist, but her works were not selling yet. She painted abstract stuff, minimalism, Karen said, but in a very emotional way, through the use of colors and shapes. I told her I thought the emotional use of color and shapes was probably too subtle to attract much attention. We ate not long after Tom arrived. He was late because he'd driven over directly from an art class he taught at a state teachers college about 50 miles away. He'd met Judith when she was a student in one of his courses. He was thin, with dark eyes, short curly hair, and he was very intense. We talked for some time about art, mixing in complimentary remarks on the food which Karen had prepared. We each drank wine steadily throughout the meal, Tom more steadily than the rest of us, and by the time dessert was being served, his conversation had passed through the lively stages and had become fully animated. His subject, in general, was the difficulty of real artists to continue with their work, faced with the twin and related problems of no audience and no income, while hack con artists, gimmick mongers, and self-promoters were the darlings of the art world, propped up by hype, raking in both fame and extravagant sums of money. "You want to know what real art is?" he said, almost furiously. "I'll tell you. Real art is the shock of recognition, when you see something for the first time. Even if you've seen it before, you've never seen it like that. It looks new, but then you realize what it is, that you already know it." "Like déjà vu," I said. "Only stronger," he said, "much stronger. You not only know it, you know it better than anything else, even if you can't precisely put it into words. You feel it in your bones. That's the shock of recognition." I said, "Can you give us an example?" "I'll give you a famous example," he said. "Oedipus, when he finds out that his wife is really his mother. That's the shock of recognition. It tears everything you thought you knew apart. And the response to a great work of art? It's silence," Tom said. "Absolute silence. Silent contemplation of the mystery revealed. Perfect recognition. That's why when you hear all the noise and hullabaloo about the latest worker in the art world, you can be sure it's just another gimmick, another hype campaign. Does art have to be shocking? Said Karen. Yes, said Tom emphatically, and not because it's new or terrifying or disgusting or anything like that. Those are superficial tremors, not real honest-to-God shocks, the profound stuff that won't go away. What I'm talking about comes when you see something new and you are forced to admit that you know it. Oh my God, that kind of shock. Tom discoursed on this for a while when he suddenly veered off to attack none other than Dr. Franklin Drake. That name jerked me back to attention. From the tense looks on the faces at the table, I knew we were in dangerous waters. Tom called Drake a fraud and a pervert. His main objection was that the Goose was using art for something other than art's sake, and this was a crime, a corruption of the first order in Tom's eyes. As he raged on furiously, Judith soon began to clear the table, and Karen quickly rose to assist her. I was left to listen to Tom rake the scurrilous Dr. Drake over the burning coals of hell. Spurred on by his dislike of the man, and his love of art, and an excess of wine, Tom asked me if I knew that Drake had actually asked Judith if he would pose for him in the nude. The nerve of the guy, he said. He even offered her money, a lot of money. My God, he's so venal. I said no, I hadn't heard anything about it, but I really didn't think the Goose was anything to worry about, one way or the other. Tom was very pleased to hear that we called Dr. Drake the Goose. It's perfect, he said, laughing. The man is nothing but a goose. About the time he said that, Judith walked back into the room. Tom motioned for her to come over and sit on his lap. I got up from my chair and left the room. I walked into the kitchen where Karen, when she saw that it was me, began holding her stomach in pantomime, wiping her forehead and going, whew, to dramatize the close call. We laughed, then washed and dried the dishes while Tom and Judith did whatever they were doing in the next room. It didn't sound like it was about art. I was pouring a cup of coffee when someone tapped on the back door. It was a friend of mine who needed a ride somewhere. We invited him in, and I told him I didn't intend to do too much traveling that night, but he was welcome to borrow my car. He was grateful for that, and for the cup of coffee and piece of homemade pie he was served by Karen. He was about to leave when Judith and Tom entered the kitchen. Introductions were made, and from the way my friend was looking at Judith, I could tell, with mounting dread, that he was making the connection. He was no stranger at the office at work. He'd drop in from time to visit, and he was fully acquainted with the Goose's unusual bevy of beauties, including the latest, the infamous Betty Coed. And when he finally placed her, where he'd seen her before, without her clothes, he said, "Oh, wow! You've got to tell me, what was it like actually posing for the Goose?" I swear to you that the silence that reigned in that room after he spoke is the most profound I can recall in my life. As it hung there, it actually began to take on weight, till it threatened to crush us all. And if anyone were to ask me, I could honestly say yes. I have heard the calm before the storm, the silence of the dawn. I have seen, I have heard, I have felt, I was witness to the shock of recognition.